Hey everyone, this is Neil Barnhill with the Barnhill Golf Institute. Wow, do we have an amazing guest with us today. Welcome to BGI's fourth episode of Talking Golf with BGI and Bryan Gathright with special guest Notah Begay. That's right, we got Notah Begay with us today. Also, I got Kyle Clapper with BGI here, Bryan Gathright, top 100 instructors on the panel, and also, like we just said, special guest Notah Begay. All right, we are so excited to have you on the show today, Notah. I can't wait to get started. And before we get started, BGI would like to recognize some of our amazing business partners such as Wilson Golf, Flight Scope, True Speed Golf, Force Pedals, and many more companies that you can find listed below. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for Barnhill Golf YouTube channel. And hey, Kyle, can you tell everyone how they can ask a question during the podcast?
Well, it's really awesome, and thanks a lot, Neil, for the introduction. It's outstanding. We're actually being live on Twitch right now. We're live on Facebook, and we're live on YouTube. So if you guys have any questions for Notah or any questions for Bryan or for Neil, go ahead and type those questions in the chat, and we'll be able to ask those questions to our very valued guests. And again, guys, from BGI, we really appreciate you guys being on the show today.
All right, so before we get into the questions here, I want to give you a little bit of background about Notah Begay for some of our listeners out there that may not know him. Notah was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He attended Stanford University and was a three-time All-American. He joined the PGA Tour in 1999 and has 4 PGA Tour wins. He was on the winning team of the President Cup in 2000. In 2005, started a nonprofit MB3 foundation. Also started the MB3 Junior Golf Championship. He's also served as an analyst with the Golf Channel and NBC Sports since 2013. So thank you, Notah, for being on our show. And we'll get started here. Notah, what have you been doing to help people out in this crisis?
Well, gosh, first and foremost, we all have to take care of our immediate family. So just learning, like millions of other people out there, just what exactly social distancing means. I think that was the first thing. My older sister, who's been a part of working with FEMA and HHS for the past 20 plus years, has been to all of the last 3 hurricane recovery efforts on behalf of FEMA. And so she's kind of been walking me down this path, but it's just like everyone else, trying to keep your family safe, trying to implement these social distancing strategies and stay at home practices, and just learning what has to be done to try and prevent the spread of the disease. I mean, it's one of the most contagious diseases we've seen in the history of mankind. And so, just making sure you're not going to, social gatherings and things, which is really hard. I mean, I think that's been the hardest part, is just we're such social people by nature, especially golfers, because we just, like to hang out. We like to give each other a hard time and play golf and hang out after. But it's been a difficult adjustment.
No, talk a little bit about, if you don't mind. I know the COVID-19 has been really especially difficult for the Native Americans, and you've been doing some amazing things there. And I want our viewers and listeners to know today there's a lot more. I've had the good fortune to know you 23 years now, and there's just a lot more to Notah Begay than the golfer and the TV personality that we've come to love, and you do a great job with that aspect of it, but you do so much more than that. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about some of the things you're doing to help your Native American communities, and also I want to talk a little bit about the business of Notah Begay.
Well, thanks, Bryan, and I certainly appreciate the kind words. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 virus has been particularly hard on Native American communities in terms of infection rates, in comparison to, some of our other regions across the country. The Navajo Nation, where I'm an enrolled member, and spent almost every summer out there until I started traveling for competitive golf, visiting my relatives. has the third highest rate of infection, per capita as far as the population is concerned, right behind New Jersey and New York. So it's been tough to watch. Family members are getting sick, and people that I grew up with and have been friends with for a long, long time are dealing with this and hospitalized, and there's not enough resources to adequately test and evaluate and kind of just see what they're up against. So it's been really, really hard to watch. Over 1,000 confirmed cases now, over 40 deaths in a population of just over 125,000. So you do the math, and it's just some pretty scary numbers. And I think it's going to still continue to climb for at least another 2 to 3 weeks before hopefully the community can get it to level off. But in response to that, I really just couldn't sit on the sidelines and watch it happen. I pledged $10,000 of my own money, and I tried to bring in a couple of other good friends, which was great. The response was great. I got 3 or 4 other people to come along with me, and so right off the bat, we had $40,000 or $50,000 to start with, and we've nearly doubled that in the last, I'd say, 2 weeks. And we had an anonymous donor come in with a matching funds pledge of an additional 100,000. So as soon as we hit the 100,000 mark, I think we just climbed over 90 today. We'll get an extra kicker in there, which is going to allow us to send about 1,800 to 2,000 individual food boxes to families that are in desperate need of a little food assistance. And not to mention that we're going to probably send about 24,000 gallons of water as well, because many people might not be aware that some of the parts on the Navajo reservation these houses don't have running water or electricity. So it's a pretty dire circumstance, and we're trying to play our small part. And I know people across the country are servicing their communities in whatever capacity they can. And I just think we need to continue to do that because we're not through this yet.
Well, I commend you on always stepping forward, and you've done so much for the Native American people forever. And a lot of people don't realize, and I was telling Neil and Kyle this earlier, but you, without question, in my opinion, are arguably, you and Jim Thorpe are the 2 most famous Native American athletes in sports history. And it's just nice to see that you've never forgotten where you came from. You've never forgotten who you are and how that's impacted you. And I can't say enough about all the good you've done for the Native American community, and in that turn, all the good you've done for people and friends, and always been willing to be there when I've reached out to you and different things, and we just so appreciate that. And shifting gears a little bit, tell us a little bit more about Notah Begay and the business side of you. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to get into the golf for our viewers and listeners, but I have the good fortune of knowing a lot more about you from our dear friendship and working together as many years we have. And I want people to know more about you than that. And I'm going to circle back to the Navajo part here in just a little bit too. But tell us a little bit more about Notah Begay, businessman right now.
Well, I think now that, when I walked away from competitive golf at the end of the 2012 season and started to do television for NBC Sports and the Golf Channel full time, it really opened up a lot of free time that I would normally have spent on the practice tee in the gym or on the recovery table, which I think is where I spent too much time in the latter part of my career. And I took that time and I just tried to be entrepreneurial. I tried to find different opportunities to just sort of grow as a person, grow as a business person, learn new industries. I think one thing that I think a lot of athletes sort of overlook is that, when we spend every waking hour trying to become the best at our sport. So I can remember since, my wife asked me, well, when did you know you wanted to be one of the best golfers in the world? I said, when I was 9. I think that's very similar for a lot of golfers that make it to the highest level, is we, for some reason, knew at an early age that this was going to be our path, and you make it your path. You're there, you're every day practicing something, going to tournaments. If you're not working at it on the course, you're doing it in the gym, or you're working on your mental game. You're trying to find some to the better. And so when you graduate from college or you leave college, and the people that you go to college with that got a degree in biology or finance or marketing, well, they probably get an entry-level position with a major corporation. And I went to Q school. So I kept playing my sport, and eventually made it to the PGA Tour. And 15 years later, I come out, and I had a nice career. I mean, nothing to be ashamed of, but I had no job experience. I had no formal corporate pedigree or resume to fall back on. I mean, thankfully, the television thing opened up for me, but a lot of athletes find themselves in that place, and golf is one of those sports where I was, in my mid to late 30s, and you just come to find out that the guy that you went to school with and graduated with in 1995 now is a CEO of this corporation, or helped start this other startup, and now is a multimillionaire flying around the world in a private jet. It's and that's the hard reality of a lot of athletes that give their life to their sport, is they walk away at the end with no job experience, having to start at the bottom. And sort of in the business world, that's where I was at. So I just tried to find different ways. I started a food company. I started to develop golf courses for Native American communities. And I feel very lucky because we were competing for those golf course development jobs with Jack Nicklaus's, the Arnold Palmers, the Pete Dyes, and the Tom Fazios of the world, and we won that work. And two out of our three courses have been named the top public access courses in their state, at least once or twice in the last 5 or 6 years. So I learned very quickly that you don't get by on your name, but you have to have some substance and a little bit of ingenuity behind who you are as a person. And I learned sort of in a difficult fashion that the smile and the PGA Tour pedigree only gets you so far, and you have to be able to understand the business of what you're doing. And the food company was a tough road. We didn't quite make it. We had to shut down basic operations about a year ago, but it lasted about 7 or 8 years. But I learned more from that in not getting it to get off the ground than I did in anything else that I've ever succeeded at, just because that was real business. I mean, you were having to deal with price points and distribution and supply chain and raw materials and packaging and USDA compliances and all of these things that when you pick up a 2 pounds of ground beef and you're in the meat section at your supermarket, you have no idea what people go through to get that meat to you at that particular moment in your life. And I have a much deeper appreciation for our food supply than I ever have in my life, and it's because I got my hands dirty and got some hard learned experience trying to make a go of it in the food business. And so I've been lucky to have had that chance, and now I'm just trying to continue to keep my options open and be a good advocate for my community, and try and help as many tribal businesses as I can through a little bit more of a consulting arm that I created early on.
Notah, tell us a little bit about your foundation, because your foundation's done so much to help Native Americans, and I know you've been not just a name on it, you've been heavily involved in that. And talk just a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, like really good things, it was a very simple concept to start that just sort of evolved and grew as opportunities presented themselves. We had a very basic soccer program that served about 100 kids on the San Felipe Pueblo Reservation in 2005. And that's really all I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a direct service, boots on the ground, close interaction with kids, with their parents, with their grandparents, and with community leaders, because I felt like that was the best way to avoid a lot of the bureaucracy and the things that I find and have come to find get in the way of good ideas. And we were successful in doing that, and we had some, great soccer programs. We had good golf programs. And then we wanted to find out a little bit more about data collection and evaluation. So I went out and I found the best partner I could, and it was Johns Hopkins University, who had been wanting to do a little bit more research around the impacts of exercise on at-risk youth. And, the term at-risk, usually applies to if you're poor and you're not in good health, you're classified as at risk. And it doesn't matter which region of the country you go to, but that's, the basic definition. And so these kids were definitely at risk. And we found that through better data collection and evaluation, we were a lot more successful for these kids. And then started to go a little bit deeper, and we started to grant money for programs that were doing well, and in order to get more information. So we've basically become a resource of data and information that can be used as a backstop or a sounding board for other Native organizations out there that need technical assistance. They need a little guidance. They need a little bit of a push in the right direction. And it's allowed us to sort of be in a lot of places and still stay small and lean, just because anybody that's ever been involved in nonprofit understands that every year you have to raise your operating budget, and sometimes it's hard. And you just, you want to be as effective as possible, but you also want to make sure that you're not so big that it becomes hard to cover the money required to run the business.
Notah, one thing that I will share with our listeners, and you and I hadn't talked about it in a while, but I know your foundation has won some national awards, and it's just so admirable for what you've been able to do. And I'm not going to hog all the questions. I know that Kyle and Neil have some questions as well. So, but I did want to give our viewers some insight into you're a lot more complex, and that economics degree from Stanford, as you guys can tell, certainly there's a lot more to Notah Begay than just golf and the things that go with golf.
That's really great what you're doing, Notah. My hat's off to you. All right, the next question. I tell you what, Notah, how did you meet Bryan Gathright? I want to hear this story.
Well, I hadn't quite been able to make it to the PGA Tour yet, and I wouldn't say I was struggling, but I was kind of in a intermediate part of my bridge from being an All-American and a national champion at Stanford to trying to play the PGA Tour. And one of my dear friends in the whole world who was responsible for me even picking up a golf club, his name was Don Zamora, had always been a close confidant of mine. And over the years, he had moved from Albuquerque and drifted on down to San Antonio. And obviously, Bryan's got a wonderful reputation that's well-deserved as a teacher and a friend to so many people in the San Antonio area, that I asked, my old pro, his name was Don Zamora, and he was the head pro at Ladera Municipal Golf Course on the west side of Albuquerque, which is where I got my start in golf. And Don saw me all the way from the age of 6 years old when I picked up a club to when I left for Stanford just after I turned 17 in the fall of 1990. And 8 years later, 7 or 8 years later, he makes a suggestion to me that there's a guy down here that I think would really suit your game. And so I went down and started just, to work with Bryan, and, it was just a very simple, very easy. What I've always loved about the way Bryan teaches is he teaches the student. He doesn't teach his method. He teaches the student. So Bryan has a wonderful grasp on the fundamentals and what's required to produce a properly struck golf shot. And I wouldn't only, I guess, experience my own lessons, but when I was on the practice tee at the same time when Bryan was teaching, I watched how he would teach 10 handicappers, 20 handicappers, and 30 handicappers. And each one of those lessons was different. And which told me that I was in the right place, because I needed someone that could teach me but didn't want to change me to conform to what that particular teacher thought was their quote-unquote method. And that was, I think, in like 97, and I finally made it to the Korn Ferry Tour, but back then it was still the Nike Tour. In 1998, and I went out and I finished 10th on the money list and paid my ticket, paved my way to the PGA Tour, and had a great run on the tour. And if not for a back injury, I might have really done some damage.
I want to interrupt you and say I think you did some damage. It just was a short-lived damage because of that. But I'm going to go back a touch and let our listeners. Don actually called me and asked if it'd be okay for Notah to come out and watch me teach, and Notah touched on it, but he did watch me teach, and he watched me teach all day, and then we actually spent some time late that evening, and you worked on it for a few months. We got together in Albuquerque. You worked on it for a few months again, and then let's talk a little bit about a special round, because you told me about a month ahead of this that you felt like you had conditional status on the Nike Tour, and you said you felt like if you could just get in 3 consecutive events, you could do something really special, and there was something really special done that 3rd consecutive event. Tell us a little bit about something that not a lot of people in the world have experience with, but shooting a 59 in a PGA Tour or PGA Tour sanctioned event.
Well, I'll tell you how the professional game doesn't really care sort of what name you have on your bag or where you went to college or who your parents were or anything like that. And I'll backtrack just a little bit. And I came out of college. I was this, hot shot, All-American, and set the scoring record. At the time was the lowest score ever shot in a single round in the history of the NCAA tournament. Was in 1994, was 62, 10 under. 1995, Tiger Woods is my teammate, and we nearly win the national championship again. And then I go to Q school, and I get to the second stage, and I find myself in a playoff to go to finals. And at the time, I was so confident, and as I look back on it now, I was highly overconfident. And it was 5 players, I believe, for 3 spots, and there was no way in my mind I was ever going to miss a five for 3 spots. I mean, there was just no way. I didn't think that there were 3 players in that 5-some that were better than me. And I hit a beautiful tee shot down the 10th hole, which was a par 5, and it's right in the middle of the fairway, and I could easily reach the green in 2. Just envisioning going to Q school, getting my card, playing in Hawaii at the Sony Open to start the season. And I hit this 6-iron, and I believe I had about 210 yards, and I hit this 6-iron, and it had to have flown 230. And I just, to this day, I don't know how I hit this 6-iron that far. And I was in El Paso at Painted Dunes. It ends up 20 yards over the green in like the cactus and the weeds, and I end up making a 7 and miss the playoff. And I end up struggling on the mini tours for the next couple years. And then I get to meet Bryan. We get back to basics and get my swing back on the right track. And here we are I make it to finals 2 years later. I finished dead last at finals. In 1997, I finished dead last at the PGA Tour Q School finals. But I still had conditional status on the Korn Ferry Tour. So early that year, I go to San Antonio. I Monday qualify for the Korn Ferry event in Monterrey, Mexico. Go down there and make the cut. I get reshuffled. I move up just enough to where I told Bryan, if I now, with elevated status, can get into 3 consecutive events, I think I can really start to sharpen my game. Well, I get into 2 consecutive and I don't play great. And so my confidence is a little down. My caddy, who was a good friend of mine and one of my dear friends in the world, had to go back to grad school, so he left me. So I ended up picking up a caddy in the parking lot on like Wednesday morning. Okay. So we go out the first day, and this was at the Dominion Golf Club in Richmond, Virginia. And I've literally made like, I don't know, maybe $1,000 for the year. It wasn't much. I might have been able to buy us dinner with what I had made at that point. And so I go out and the first round, and I'm playing solid and everything's going great. And I'm 2 under through 7 holes. It's like, okay, we're 2 under. I'm sorry, it was a second round. I shot 74 the first day, which I was on my way to missing another cut. So I'm 2 under. I'm even par for the tournament. The projected cut was going to be about 2 under. So I'm like, okay, I've got 11 holes left. I was like, just bear down. You're playing good. You're hitting good shots. And so I make about a 30-foot putt on the 8th hole. So I go to 3 under, par 5, 9th hole. I started on 10, so my 9th hole was actually the 18th. So walking down 18, hit it around in 2, make another birdie, so I'm 4 under. I'm like, okay, we're in business. We're on the cut line right now. So we can either make our fortunes and play our way into contention, or you can just kind of struggle and hang on for dear life. So I hit my tee shot on the 10th hole right down the middle, and I've got like 119 yards, and I had a gap wedge. It was a 53-degree Cleveland gap wedge at the time, and I hit it exactly like 118 to 120. That was the full, comfortable, good swing. And I'm like, I'm playing great. I'm 4 under for the day, and let's go play this front 9 and make some noise here. So hit this shot, pure, disappears in the hole. Hole out. Automatically go to 6 under. Par 5's the next hole. Hit it around in 2, get up and down. I'm 7 under. Go to the par 3, playing about a little bit downhill. It was about 220 yards down the hill. I took a 5-iron. And I hit might have been the straightest shot I've ever hit in my life. It never left the flag. Kind of down, the green was sitting down, was an elevated tee, so we could see the whole green, saw the ball land, and it disappeared in the hole.
Oh, my God.
Hole in 1.
Oh, my gosh.
So I go from 2 under standing on my 8th tee to now I'm 9 under standing on what would be my 13th hole of the day. And so I had one of my good friends from college, Steve Burdick, who now does a wonderful job for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes as a youth minister. He comes out and starts following me, and he knows, I was a very cocky player in college. So I'm walking to 13th tee, and I look at him. I said, I'm going to shoot 59 today. And so the 13th hole is a par 5, and I hit a great drive, and I could almost reach it in 2, and I made a par. And I'm just like, oh God, I just let a great opportunity slip through my fingers. And, but then I came back and I birdied the next 2 holes. So I was standing on 16T at 11 under, and in my mind, I'm like, I need to get to 13, and hit a terrible drive on 16, hit an amazing recovery shot out of the woods, landed on the green, made an easy 2-putt, and I'm still thinking I need 2 birdies. I've got 2 holes left. I need 2 birdies. And I made the most ridiculous putt. It was a 6-foot breaking putt left to right downhill. And I made it on 17, and I walked to 18T, and I'm 12 under with 1 hole to play. And the 18th hole for me that day, which was the 9th, is a par 3. So that was a lot easier. I mean, you didn't have to hit a tee shot. So I get up there with a 6-iron, and I hit this ball, and it literally was just like the shot off my 12th hole. It went right at the hole, and honest to God, I thought I made it. I thought I shot 58. And it flew right over the flag and landed about 10 feet behind the hole. And I'm walking up there, and by now word has gotten around, and there's probably, maybe, and back then, if you got, 25 people to watch you, that was a big crowd. There was probably 50 people around the green to see if I could make this putt. And it was about 10 or 12 feet. And the only thing that went through my mind once I got my read and once I got everything situated when I was over the putt was I just told myself, I go, nobody's going to remember you tomorrow if you shoot 60. And that's the only thing I told myself. And that was kind of my trigger. I said, nobody's going to remember you tomorrow if I shoot 60. And then I pulled the putter back and I knocked it in. And at the time, it was the first 59 in the history of the Korn Ferry Tour, and I think only the 4th the 3rd or 4th in the history of the PGA Tour. So I'm going to go shoot 13 under on a par 72. So that's the real time version of the story, and it's fun every time I tell it.
I bet.
That's Notah. That's one. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bryan.
No, go ahead, Kyle. You go right ahead, sir.
I mean, that shooting a 59 and actually gutting out that putt like that is outstanding. So before we kind of move on to things, I just want to make sure everyone, if you have any questions for Notah, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And also make sure to look down in the description in YouTube and look through all our different sponsors, including Wilson Golf, True Speed Golf, WEC Method Golf, or WEC Method Fitness, and make sure to look through all of that and make sure to support those people, those companies through these difficult times. No, I kind of want to go into something a little bit different. I want to give you some really fast, quick-hitting questions. We're going to call them BGI's quick hitters. So I'm going to give you this question. I don't want you to think about it. I just want you to go with it and tell me your gut instinct answer. So here we go. First one. Your favorite golf movie?
Oh, man, that's easy. That's Caddyshack.
There you go. All right. We can go on to the next question.
It's a lame,
all right.
It's a lame answer because that's probably the answer everyone else has.
Or Tin Cup. Or Tin Cup. All right. Favorite club in the bag?
My putter.
Go-to shot?
Fade.
Favorite comfort food?
Ice cream.
Your favorite tournament to play in?
The Masters.
If you could play one course the rest of your life, which one?
St. Andrews.
Favorite memory on the golf course other than the 59?
It was probably in 2016 when I got the chance to tell Tiger, who was assistant captain at the time, that the United States had won the Ryder Cup.
Wow.
Other than the one hole-in-one, do you have any others?
10.
Oh, gosh.
And last one, either or on this one. Getting to a par 5 and 2 or making a long birdie putt on a par 3?
A long birdie putt. I'll take that.
All right.
The bird in the hand.
There you go. I like that. All right, on to you, Neil.
All right, so kind of to piggyback off the putting, I tell you what, I just distinctly remember watching you putt when you were playing on the tour, and it just stood out in my mind when I was growing up. Can you tell everybody how you developed that style of putting, and can you explain it to everybody, because everybody may not know the story?
Yeah, it's the style of putting is switch putting, which basically means that left to right putts I hit left-handed and right to left putts I hit right-handed. And the goal is to never have a putt that breaks away from you. So the majority of golfers would tell you if you're a right-hander, the toughest putt for them is the left to right sliding putt, the left to right downhiller. And you could have even the best putters in the world on the PGA Tour. If you get a putt that's breaking, 6 or 7 inches left to right, a little bit downhill, it makes these players look silly. It's just a hard putt, just based on just sheer physics, for even the best players to make on a consistent basis. And I was lucky enough to run into 2 old friends, Brian Stack and Tim Holman, that wrote a book called Inside the Arc. And it just talked about the advantages of hitting right to left putts right-handed and left to right putts left-handed. And so they wrote this book sort of in the mid to late 80s. And without sort of any it was more of a theory at the time. And lo and behold, if you read, I forget the publication, but there was a study that came out within the last couple of years that showed the percentages of PGA Tour players from all the various positions of the clock. So if 12 o'clock was a straight downhill putt and 6 o'clock from below the hole was a straight uphill putt, it showed that at the 8 o'clock position, the 9 o'clock position, and the 10 o'clock position, in contrast to the 2 o'clock position, 3 and 4 o'clock on the opposite side, the percentages for those left to right breaking putts for a right-handed putter were almost 5% lower for a PGA Tour player. Same distance, same break, same speed of green, just the dynamic of the putt sets up different. And when I read this, I kind of chuckled, because I'm like, well, these guys knew this like almost 30 years ago. And they wrote the book and nobody caught on. Roger Maltby was the first player to ever use it in a PGA Tour event. And then I was the first player to ever win with it on the PGA Tour. And to this day, I haven't seen any player at an elite level utilize the left to right strategy, probably for a couple reasons. Number one, you got to get over everybody laughing at you.
Yes, you do.
And number two, you're really at a loss when it comes to the types of putters that you're able to use. I basically, Scotty Cameron was kind enough to make me a handful of custom bullseye putters that I won all my tournaments with. But Callaway and TaylorMade and Ping all were kind enough to try and make a version of what they thought those sorts of putters would look like. And so they're all custom one-of-a-kind putters, which is pretty cool to have in the garage. But it's just a hard thing to do. And I think it's not the physical talent in terms, I think almost every player on the tour could probably do it. It's just, it takes a while for your eyes to adjust to looking at the hole from a left-handed position. And then there's just some speed and touch issues that sort of you have to get used to, which just require a lot of reps. So if anything, it forced me to stay on the putting green for hours on end, which is good for anybody's game.
Absolutely.
I've got a lightning round question going back for this one, Notah, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway for our viewers and listeners. 10-footer to win a tournament, would you rather hit it right or left-handed?
Oh.
That's good. My left-handed stroke is better, but every really big putt I've made, I've hit right-handed. So I'm going to have to say right-handed.
You know, it's interesting, Notah. We were standing on the practice green late one evening. You and Tiger were practicing, and Butch Harmon and I were there visiting. And I've always thought this might have been a test question from Butch because I was a pretty unknown, unheralded instructor at that point in time in 2000. And Butch pulled me aside, and he goes, "So which stroke is better?" And I looked at him and I said, "You know, Butch," I said, "I think you and I both would agree. Fundamentally, you were better left-handed, I always felt." I said, "But every putt that you've had to win, it seems like it's always turned out that you made it and it was right-handed." And he kind of smiled and looked at me and said, "You're absolutely right." And I always felt like that was maybe a test question that Tiger might have put Butch up to, but I would always agree. I think fundamentally you and I both knew you were as sound as you could be left-handed. The right-handed stroke had a little bit of a cut move in it, but it didn't matter. They went in both ways, which is fabulous. And I think for our viewers as well, I think you kind of enjoyed the fact that it was a little different than everybody else as well.
Yeah, I never mind being different. I mean, ever since I stepped on the course, I was always perceived to be a little different for obvious reasons. I was usually the only Native American on the entire golf course, and that was the case through most of my career. First Native American on the Walker Cup team and the President's Cup team, and so it's kind of been a normal experience for me, and so I didn't really mind standing out. I really trusted the numbers. I trusted the research that Bryan and Tim had sort of brought to the table, and I was sort of playing the long game. And if you want to talk sort of from a finance and investment side, I put the time in and believed in what I was investing in, and I thought that it would pay off down the road, which it did. It did greatly because it just gave me another gear. I mean, one thing that I've always been known for was just an innate ability to shoot really low scores out of nowhere. I could be having the worst streak of golf in my life, but then one day could go out and just out there and shoot 61 or 60 or 59. And it was because of my putting. I mean, you get a day on the greens, and a quick example is you get a PGA Tour player that goes out there and says, "Wow," he goes out there, puts a solid round together, not a great round, a solid round, hits 14 greens, and you're talking to him in player dining and at lunch, and he's like, "Gosh, I hit it great. I didn't make anything, and I missed 5 times inside 15 feet." Goes out the next day and shoots 64, and you're having lunch with that same guy, and he's like, "Well, I made those 4 or 5 extra putts." Well, there's no stat that's kept for day one. That player, those 5 putts he missed were all left to right, and day 2 he just coincidentally got the same kinds of putts, but they were all right to left. And when somebody gets a hold of being able to track that data and has the sense to do it, I think you're going to see some really interesting things come as a result of that. And that's all going to fall on the shoulders of these 2 gentlemen, Brian Stack and Tim Holman, who noticed it early on in the 80s that this was something that could benefit a player with real numbers. I mean, every single golfer is out there trying to improve, trying to find that extra stroke. And on the PGA Tour, you're trying to find that eighth of a stroke, that quarter of a stroke that's going to make the difference. I mean, if you can find a quarter of a shot somewhere over the course of a week, you're going to save yourself a shot. And you go on any player in the top 150 on the FedEx Cup points race, and you take a shot off their score every week, and they go from 145th to 90th just by saving one shot a week, and they make $1 million extra. I mean, it's that cut and dry with regard to scoring and how it relates to where your position is on those points lists and in the money race.
Kind of jumping off that, Bryan brought up the test part of that, and it is interesting how you brought up the long game and stuff like that, and making those the unique choice. I got another unique question from one of our viewers. Living or deceased, what is your dream foursome?
I'm more of a, I don't know. I guess I'd love to play with the historical great players. Okay. I mean, it'd be wonderful. I've always loved the Francis Ouimet story. I think that's a great story. So I think that'd be someone I'd love to have in my group. I would love to play with Bobby Jones. I just think he was a very dynamic person in our game, was much more than a golfer. And I think it'd just be fun to sort of hear his thoughts on the game and maybe even play some videos for him. I'll show him some videos on my phone of Tiger Woods and see what he thought about that guy. And Jack Nicklaus. I think I just missed playing a lot of golf with Jack by about 5 or 6 years. I think he was had kind of stopped playing on the regular tour at that point. And so I feel like I really missed out on a lot. I've gotten to play tons of golf with Tiger, and we're great friends and whatever, but I would have really loved to have played with Jack just because of his record and the way he thinks, and I just have a deep appreciation for what he did on the golf course and how he did it.
Notah, I'm going to jump around just a little bit, but you and I shared something recently, and I want you to talk about it at length a little bit, if you don't mind. You've learned as a broadcaster, you mentioned to me, you noticed something that is very, very unique and different, because for our viewers, you being a roving reporter, you're always with the best players. And you made a comment recently to me about what you had noticed about the best of the best, at the difference between those top 6 or 8 or 10 players and the rest of the great players on the tour, but maybe those that aren't quite in that upper echelon. And if I threw you a curveball, I can help, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Well, what I've really noticed in terms of the players that separate themselves is their willingness to take on difficult shots under pressure. I think if there's one thing that separates a player's ability to perform at the highest level, and I mean in the FedEx Cup playoffs, in the major championships, it's their ability to deal with the pressure. And, there's a reason that player A has never won a PGA Tour event, or there's a reason that player B has won one tournament but has 50 top 10s. Once you get enough reps and tournaments under your belt, all of these trends and these patterns start to appear with each player. And there's a reason that a guy like a Jim Furyk, who doesn't have the best swing in the world but has a wonderful resume and is a major champion, is able to do that and play like that. And it has less to do with their physical abilities and more to do with how they perceive themselves and how they deal with pressure situations. And I think that the players that set themselves apart in terms of the players that you see making the Ryder Cup, the players that you see regularly in the top 30 on the money list, are the ones that deal with the pressure the best.
Yeah, that's well said. Sorry to interrupt you there, Notah.
No, not at all.
Something me and Bryan were talking about. What led you into a career of broadcasting? And second part of that is there anyone in particular or people that have helped and influenced you as a broadcaster?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people really step up, and but one person in particular, number one, Tommy Roy, our executive producer for the NBC golf team, he gave me the shot. I mean, he saw a clip of me doing some stuff for Golf Channel for the Masters, and he gave me a chance to come out and be part of the NBC team, and brought me on and has taught me so much about broadcasting. But Marv Rolfing, my very first event that I did for NBC Sports, was the person that literally took me out on the golf course and walked me through certain situations and taught me how to just explain what's going on. Because there's a difference between how you would explain things as a player versus how you would explain them as a broadcaster, and understanding who your audience is. And so, for instance, a show like this, the majority of listeners and viewers play golf. Same thing with viewers on the Golf Channel. Over 85% of our viewers play golf, and the most important golfer in their life is themselves. So my job as a broadcaster, having a chance to follow the best players day after day, is to take what the best players in the world do and in the game and try and relate it to our viewers. How can they learn from what they're seeing? How can they learn from somebody's setup from a fairway bunker with a mid-iron in their hand? How can they learn from where somebody tees it up in relation to the left side of the tee box or the right side of the tee box when there's trouble down the left or trouble down the right? Those are things that we can do to enlighten and engage our viewers. And it's something that I've had to learn over the past few years, and being able to go out every day with guys like Roger Maltby, who I consider the best walking reporter to have ever taken a microphone out on the golf course. I mean, he just has a wonderful way to explain, and it's very simple, and he communicates it well. He's extremely intelligent and does a wonderful job of laying things out for you there. And so that's my goal every day is, can I do something that can make our viewers better? Because when you go from the Golf Channel audience, which majority plays golf, to a national television audience on network television on NBC Sports, well, now you're going from the golf clubs of the world into the sports bars of the world, and then all the normal statistics for mainstream sports viewers start to apply, where maybe it might be 1 in 10 people having a beer at the bar play golf. So I just went from an audience where I was almost 9 out of 10 that play golf to now it's less than 1 or right around 1 or something like that. So now it becomes more about sports and situations and explaining those factors that play into the overall outcome of an event and how a player perceives and performs under a given situation. So if we can articulate that to the viewers, then we've done our job.
You do a great job. I'm entertained when I listen to you. I enjoy listening to you when you're out there on the course. And to your point, I mean, Roger Maltby, he's just incredible. But you do unbelievable. And I tell you what, you do a great job. So, Notah, it's no secret that Tiger considers you one of his closest friends. Can you talk about your relationship with Tiger when Tiger was a freshman at Stanford?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun at his expense when he was a freshman at school. And I first met him when he was 9 years old. and he was playing in the at the time it was called the Optimist Junior World Golf Championships, and they were in San Diego, and he was in the same age division as my brother Clint. And so I went out to watch my brother, and I'm like, I heard this Tiger Woods kid was out there, and everybody knew the name. I didn't know who he was. And I just had heard he was winning tournaments by like 10, 15, 18 shots. And I'm like, I had to go check this guy out. And so got a chance to watch him play and went up and introduced myself. And we formulated a friendship ever since and came to be very close friends. And he eventually made it to Stanford as a freshman. And we, just to set the scene here, we had, on the team that Tiger played on, we had 4 seniors and Tiger, who was the only freshman on the starting 5. And on top of that, we had just won the national championship in 1994 without Tiger. So it was literally a scenario where if Tiger came in and helped us win another national championship, he would just have made us as good as we were the year before. So it was a tough situation for him to walk into. It was a break-even proposition at best, and I knew that, and I kind of took advantage of it. And when he came on campus for the very first practice, it was my duty to haze him. It was my duty to treat him like a freshman, and I did it. And he came on campus, and I told him he was going to be the strongest freshman in America, and he was very happy to hear that from me. And I said, because you're going to carry all our bags on all of our trips. And he looked at me like, am I serious? And so the very first trip, we leave from the Stanford Golf Club. We're going to an event, and I had made sure all the guys got there a little bit early. We piled all of our duffel bags in one huge pile right in front of the clubhouse, about 100 yards away from our team van, which was ready to take us to the airport. And Tiger pulls in, and he looks at us, and we look at him, and I say, there's our bags. Start carrying them. And because we had 4 seniors and we were already national champions, he didn't really have much to argue with. And so he carried all the bags, and we got to the tournament site, and they came off the baggage carousel, and he got them all off and took them out to the curb, and it was fun. It was great. And about 3 tournaments in, he'd kind of had enough of it, and he came into my room to talk to Casey Martin and myself, who were the co-captains of the team, and he asked if he won the next tournament, could he not do this anymore? And at the time, Tiger wasn't playing very well, and so Casey and I looked at each other and says, yeah, that'll buy us. I mean, we knew he was going to win one eventually, but it would at least buy us a few more events where we could laugh and sort of give him a hard time as he's carrying the bags. And so we agreed to it, and he goes out the very next week and he wins the next tournament, which put all of our fun to a quick stop. But he was a great teammate, and he's a good friend, and to be a part of that team, and not just Tiger, but guys like Casey Martin, who, if you've ever followed his story, you understand sort of what he's overcome with regard to the tough problem he's had with his leg and not being born with the veins in his right leg that actually pull the blood out, and having to go up against the PGA Tour and the Supreme Court. And he represented a lot of people with physical challenges in this country, and advocated for them, and just to be able to sit in the Supreme Court and argue your case, I guess, is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And then to win on top of that, I think is just as remarkable as, Tiger winning the 1997 Masters. 2 groundbreaking, historic things that happened that I was personally connected to the people that made that type of impact on society, which I consider myself very lucky.
Notah, I want to go a step further with that. I want to talk a little bit about a very special week that you and I had the good fortune of sharing in 2000 at Valhalla. You were in 11th position going into that week to make the President's Cup team. It was certainly no secret that Tiger wanted you on that team. We'd talked about it. You guys had talked about it. And I believe it was Tuesday afternoon we were on the range, and Ken Venturi, who was the captain, called you back by the back ropes and talked a little bit. And I'd like for you to share a little bit about that conversation, and then subsequently what all happened the rest of that week.
Ken was one of the coolest captains I've ever played for. He was very hands off. I think he understood. I think people like that just have an understanding and a way to get the players to play for them. And it wasn't anything sort of deep or technical or anything. He just sort of encouraged me to go out and do what I was capable of doing. And with the understanding, which I thought was incentive enough for me, that if I were to make the team on my own merit, that he was going to pair me with Tiger. And you got to understand, at that time, the Tuesday before the PGA Championship Valhalla, Tiger had won the previous 2 majors. So that was the record-setting performance at Pebble Beach and at St. Andrews, sort of in back-to-back majors. And the PGA in 2000 was going to be, ended up being his 3rd in a row. So I knew it was going to be so much fun just because I loved playing in the spotlight. I loved sort of being in that arena. And I knew that Tiger was going to have the eyes of the world on him at the President's Cup, and to be alongside as a teammate and as a great friend was sort of a dream of mine. And so it was all the incentive that I needed from Captain Venturi for me to go out and just play, one of the sharpest professional rounds of my life in the final round on Sunday to earn my place and move up a couple spots and not have to worry about being picked, but earn my way on that team. And we went out in the United States. I think it's still the largest winning margin in the history of the President's Cup.
And to go a step further, it was certainly fun to get to watch you and Tiger play against Ernie Els and BJ Singh, and then you beat Retief Goosen in the singles. So it was quite a week. But I can assure you, I was asked recently on another show about my most memorable moment in golf, and it was walking up off the back of that 18th green after you'd birdied the 17th and 18th hole to play your way onto that team. And what a special time, and certainly was unbelievable for me to get to see that and witness all the great golf you played that last round.
Yeah, that was, you have a much better memory of those things than I do. Sometimes it seems like it was just a blur, but I had a unique ability to just finish rounds off like that. And I had a friend in college who played at University of New Mexico, and we'd been playing against each other for decades. And it was at one college tournament. I birdied the 18th hole, and he goes, I've watched you finish. He's like probably 100 rounds. And he goes, I think in 90 of the 100 you've birdied the last hole. And I just kind of chuckled and sort of blew it off. But I don't know. When the urgency gets up, like I said, I just had an ability to deal with the pressure, and that's what you have to have. And, I don't have any regrets about my career or anything that I was able to experience, because I consider it all a very fortunate opportunity for me. But it literally would have been nice to see what I could have done if I really had stayed healthy, just for, another 2 or 3 years, to see if I could have actually moved up into the top 10 in the world ranking. I think I got as high as 11 or 12, but never could quite crack the top 10.
Well, for those that are watching that don't know, in 1999 and 2000, you won more times worldwide than anyone except Tiger Woods, and you won 4 times during that about a 14-month span there, and then the injury came after that. But I think it's pretty safe to assume you would have been well on your way up that path with what was happening with the players around you and everything else.
Yeah, it was a good run. It was a fun run.
It was a fun run.
There is nothing better than being a professional golfer playing great golf, because it was literally, you have it so fine-tuned. I was warming up about 15 minutes before each round, and you fall out of bed and you feel like you could shoot 67 every day. It's just kind of an amazing place to be. I will never get back to that point. But at least I had a small window to just feel what it was like to have at least a couple hands on the steering wheel with regard to the game of golf, because as any of us know that have ever pursued this to some sort of, aspirational degree, it's one damn hard game.
That it is, Notah. So as far as aspirations go, I'm the same age as you are, and I know right around the corner's age 50. Are you thinking about Champions Tour, or are you going to stay the course of broadcasting, or do a little bit of both?
I'm thinking about it. But then my back keeps reminding me that I've got limitations. So I really want to give it a roll, and I think I'm going to have a small surgery on my back to even have a chance, because right now I just don't have the capacity to play 3 weeks in a row on top of putting all the practice and preparation in that you're going to have to put in. I mean, it's not a huge procedure. I have still a disc fragment that's protruding into sort of my spinal column, that causes discomfort. And I've gotten used to it. I live with it. There's nothing that it holds me back from doing except playing competitive golf. I mean, I could still run. I train regularly. I can hike. I can play casual golf for 3-4 days, no problem. I chase my kids around. I swim. I do virtually everything, but it's just competitive golf's not really an option right now. So hopefully, I'll come to a decision to get on that operating table and take a whack at it and see if the doctors can't sort of free up the daily discomfort that I experience, just to give me a chance to, because I don't want to do it just because I can. I believe under the current policies, I'm fully exempt for the first year. I don't believe in that. If I'm going to do it, I really have to start playing a lot and training about 18 months before my 50th birthday, which is going to be, I'm about 15 months away from that. So it's coming a lot faster than I'd like, but nonetheless, I've thought about it quite a bit.
Well, we would love to see you out there playing. Hopefully your surgery goes well and you'll have the opportunity to get back out there and do what you love. All right. So, when you're out there broadcasting and on the course, how difficult is it when Tiger is out there playing to be biased to other players? Because I know how close you are to Tiger.
It's difficult to not be biased with a lot of the players. I mean, so many of the players I've had great friendships with, played college golf, played junior golf, and it's hard to be critical, but what I've always tried to do is not make it personal. I don't think that humor at the expense of somebody that's out there making a go of it and putting the time in and putting themselves on the line on a day-to-day basis, I don't think that's an appropriate style that I'd like to have. I try and keep my criticisms, which are warranted. If somebody makes a bad tactical error in a decision or bad execution, I have to talk about it. That's my job. But I don't. I wouldn't tell them anything on. I wouldn't say anything on air that I wouldn't tell them over dinner. And I've had players come up that are good friends of mine saying, "Hey, look, I think you pushed the edge a little," and it's never confrontational. Guys, they have feelings. They're out there gutting it out, and don't like to be criticized. I mean, I don't think any athlete likes to be criticized, and so we usually just talk it out, and I tell them my point of view and sort of usually provide some evidence to support my argument, and we usually work it out.
It's got to be difficult. Go ahead, Bryan.
No, go ahead, Kyle.
I was saying that's got to be very difficult. It's also, I mean, you wanted to cheer them on, and do you ever feel any of that kind of nerves at all? I know you said you handled the nerves so well, but do you ever feel that when you see Tiger, especially with the comeback that he's been able to do? Do you ever get that nervous, competitive spirit running through you, even though you're not on the course at the time or playing at the time?
The only time I've ever really gotten it, and I wouldn't say nerves, but when there was emotion going through myself, and I don't know if I projected it on air or not, was when he was struggling. That was hard. Yeah. Just because I know what he's capable of. I know how hard he works and how much he puts into it, and how much criticism he was going to get for playing poorly. And a lot of it's not fair. It's just because he's Tiger, and you saw it when he struggled. All the writers and media folks that felt that they had been wronged by him at some point in the previous 10 or 15 years all had a free shot, and they all took it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part for me. But when Tiger's playing well, I have no expectations, because he always exceeds them. Like, he always surpasses them. And so I literally just watch. It's probably the only time in my life that I actually just watch. Because this is going to be gone soon. And we were lucky enough to recapture it again as golf fans, as players, as people that have been in the game. You guys have been around the game. Bryan Gathright given his life to the game. And, we've all done it at some point, and Tiger Woods is the best that we've ever seen.
Yep.
And there will not be anybody come close to him for a long, long time, if ever.
Yep.
And it's going to be gone soon. And I think that we're all going to wish that we paid a little bit more attention to when it was happening and not take it for granted.
Notah, that was one of the things that I always look back because of you. I was probably the luckiest coach on the planet, because I got to see it up close and personal in 99, 2000, 2001, when you and I talked about it on a number of occasions. I mean, we were seeing golf like it's never been played before. And my hat's off to you for letting me have a ride on that train to see that, because it was something special, and thank God we were able to get to witness it, and hopefully get to see some more of it here before too long. Kyle, I know you are a history teacher by trade as well.
I am.
Do you have a question you wanted to ask Notah?
I definitely do, and I have to kind of bring in everything full circle, and being the history teacher that I am, I really appreciate the love that you have for your culture. I have Native American blood in me. Obviously not as much as you, but I'm very proud of that heritage. And there's something that, from the history perspective, I would love for you to share a little bit about, and that's the story of the Navajo Wind Talkers, because that's something that I enjoy teaching about when I get to World War II. So if you could share a little bit on that, I'd really appreciate it.
That's a really unique part of our history, and there's quite a few layers to that. But the first point that I would love to bring up is, my grandfather was a code talker in the United States Marine Corps, My father served in the U.S. Marine Corps, and my brother also served in the Marine Corps. And in my house, it was either go to college or go to the Marines, and I chose college. So I'm really proud of the history of military service in our family, and in particular my grandfather, who, if you look back on the state of the country at the time, it was still segregated to a certain degree. I know my dad had told me stories about the family having to get food out of the back door of restaurants, and Native Americans were still in a very compromised status of living with regard to the rights and opportunities that they had in this country as American citizens. And I think it's one of the most inspirational things that I see when I think of the Code Talkers, is that I never got a chance to meet my grandfather. He died from an infection he acquired when he was in service in the Pacific. But I have talked to some of the original Code Talkers, and one of the things that they said is that, we didn't have rights in this country. We didn't have opportunity in this country, but that's not why we went over there. And that's not why we served this country. It's like, we serve this country because we are connected to this land. And if you look at, we have a unique relationship with land on our reservations. A lot of blood was spilled on this land. If you look through the Dakotas and the wars that took place in those particular eras, I mean, similar to the way farmers look at their farms. I mean, there's a spiritual connection that we had to this land, and that's what inspired many of these men to enlist in the service and create this code. And I know we told some stories of the Corn Ferry Tour and my 59 on the Corn Ferry Tour, and that was probably the highlight of my career on that particular tour. But maybe the second one was when I was trying to work my way back from injury. I had to take a few starts on the Corn Ferry Tour, and I ended up in Lafayette, Louisiana at the event there. And I wasn't playing great. I was hurt. I was lost with my swing. I was lost with my confidence. And I had just shot, another 75 and was going to miss the cut. It was hot and humid, and I was sweating in every place on my body. The shirt was drenched and tired and down and walking off the 18th green, and tournament director comes up to me and says, "Hey, there's somebody I'd really like you to meet." And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this is like the last thing I want to do. I'm so over this right now. But I know as a professional, these are the things you do. I mean, this is what I think makes our game great is, we don't feel like it, but we do it because we know it pushes the game forward. And so he takes me up to one of the hospitality suites, and I meet a gentleman who's in his 80s, and he's shaking to shake my hand, and he's got tears in his eyes. And, he's a white gentleman, grew up in the South, and just so proud to meet me. And I had no idea why. I'm like, why does this man literally in tears and just can't barely hold his hand still long enough to shake my hand? And he says, I served in the Pacific. And he said, if it wasn't for men like your grandfather, he goes, I would not be here today. Wow. And it really put things in perspective for me. I'm like, geez, I'm mad because I shot 75, and this guy really acknowledges what those Code Talkers, if you look back at all the wars, over the course of mankind. It's the only wartime code that was never broken. And we were outmanned. We had poor positioning. And the only way that we were able to overcome that is because we could communicate over the free radio waves without anybody knowing what we're saying. And that's how big of a role it played in the campaign in the Pacific, and that's how we were able to win that particular part of the war. And it saved hundreds of thousands of lives, and it's really a neat story.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, Notah, I want to tell you thank you, and the one thing I've shared with Kyle and also with Neil, and I want all of our viewers and listeners. I've been very fortunate in my career, and you talking about getting old. Well, trust me, I'm a lot older than you are, buddy, and it's not that bad. You still got a lot of golf left in you, so hang in there on that. But the one thing that I want to commend you, and I want all of our viewers and listeners to know, I've had the good fortune in my career to meet a lot of successful athletes, a lot of successful people in business, a lot of successful people in acting and broadcasting and different things. And I can attest that you're absolutely one of the good ones, but most importantly, you're the same guy that I met in 1996 and 97 when you came out to La Cantera, and I just commend you for that. And I'm as proud as I can be to call you a gentleman and a true friend of mine. And thank you for this time with us today. I love you, man.
Absolutely. I've been fortunate to be a part of this game, and it's given me a whole heck of a lot more than I've ever given it. The most rewarding thing is friendships such as yours and the wonderful people that we have the opportunity through golf to meet along the way. You could show up to any public course in the country and just walk in and tee it up, get placed randomly with any group, and more often than not, you're going to walk off that 18th tee making a friend and meeting somebody that's probably pretty interesting. And I think it's the only real sport that has that social element, and so much of our history and the integrity of the game is still a big part of what makes it so special.
Well, Notah, I tell you, I'm going to speak for Kyle too here, but I think we probably both of us have goosebumps right now. I mean, that's the story with the Wind Talker, your grandfather, just everything that you're doing with golf. I tell you what, our hats are off to you, and we're so fortunate to have you on our show today. And hopefully you'll come back another time, because I know there's a lot more stories, because Brian's told me some of them. I don't know if they're true or not, so we got to make sure.
Oh, yeah. We got more stories. Sure. We always have stories.
I will talk about it on the next podcast.
Okay. Fellas.
So anyways, I want to thank Bryan Gathright, obviously Notah, for you being on the show, and all our business partners at BGI, such as Wilson Golf, Flight Scope, True Speed Golf, the Net Return, the Real Field Golf Mats. We got some great business partners we're associated with that Kyle and I are very fortunate to be involved with. So take a look at that. And next week we have an exciting podcast. I don't know what day it's going to be, but it's going to be with Martin Chuck. So we will let you know on our Instagram and Facebook accounts, Twitter, when that show will happen. Until then, we'll see you next podcast.